We have only 35 chambers. There is no 36.
I know that. But I want to create a new chamber.
And what would that be?
I think Shaolin techniques should be available to all. So then, that's my idea for a new chamber. To teach the martial arts to the people. Anybody.
All right, welcome back to another episode of My 3 Cents. So, this one I'm going to get a little technical, a little educational. It's going to be a real interesting episode that is pretty much based on the path that I took or the path I was on when I started to go through what I like to call the genetic activation or the awakening, however you want to refer to it. It's when your genetics kick in that have been dormant and been so much, kind of you can say, waiting on you. Something for you to do so that you can activate, right? So this is what we refer to when we're talking about activation, genetic activation. So with me, the first thing I think that I was doing, because I've always studied, I've always been curious about different things. I've never really been settled with religion because I was always forced into it since a kid. That was just our culture. All of us, my brother and I, we had to get up early, try to play sleep on Sunday morning, so that possibly some kind of way we could get overlooked. I know that's like a kid dream. It's never gonna happen. But it was funny because I just never really connected with it, right? So when I got older, I kind of left religion a little bit behind, and I always talk about shadow work. And what you got to understand is things that you choose not to deal with, you need to at least go back in a different capacity and be able to understand why you chose not to deal with this thing and exactly what it was and what it is to you. That's very important, right? So I kind of did that because life kind of just brought me to that point where some of the knowledge and stuff I was running into was getting into religion, and it was all starting to tie in. And I found some very odd connections, and that just bust the whole thing wide open, right? And you have people that you call conspiracy theorists and different things like that, but it's really just a lot of people that's on a path of discovery and enlightenment that they don't. It's hard to anchor down when you're in the path or the journey. It's hard to find somewhere to anchor. So a lot of times you might seem all over the place or feel all over the place. Some of the information is right. Some of the information proves to be different than you thought it was. That's a beautiful thing. That's progression. That's how it's supposed to work. The only time that bothers you is because you done went off and told somebody when you haven't really fully connected with the information. So it's kind of a lesson to stop doing that and just let it resonate with you in a way that where it becomes more of a part of you. Then you can go and kind of share it with people. And also, it's important to not lead them astray by just giving them information that you can't really break down and help them connect with, right? So, like I said, with me, it was religion, and I started studying the Bible, studying different things. I've always kind of known it. I was the kid that could say the Bible verses. I could quote them, just running them down. The Easter speeches, all that. The funny moments at church with the Easter speech. I was that kid, forgetting his lines, So the thing with me was that when I started studying into the Bible, I just started at the beginning, right? Where it literally says in the beginning. And I said, okay, so what can I do? I got to go back before the Bible. I'm reading this stuff, understanding how they're trying to give it to me. They're trying to give it to me very literal. That's a red flag, okay? How can it be timeless and literal? You got to understand this. So I started studying Hebrew. And, my uncle was somebody I looked up to very much so. He was a minister for a very long time, and I found it intriguing that at some point he kind of started getting away from that. And he started studying Hebrew, and he literally went, over there to study off the actual scrolls. Like he had access to some of this stuff, studying with some of the different leaders over there, the elders, right? And I found it interesting, and I'm like, man, what did he find? Like, what is he seeing that's showing him that opened up the world that he's always been in, right? Like, what's changing him? I was curious about that. So I thought back to that, and I started looking into Hebrew. I started learning Hebrew. I started studying Hebrew. It's not that hard to learn if you just sit down and do it with the Hebrew alphabet. It's really not that hard to learn. But here's the key thing about it. It's supposed to really translate into number symbols because the numbers themselves have certain energies. And this goes into a more esoteric way of understanding how religion is this esoteric mind gripper, right? It's something that's trying to hold your mind captive. This is a energetic play. You know, this is what a lot of people don't understand. And so this was one of the connections of that is that when you go into it and understand that what they're giving you in the form of these scriptures, these scripts, what they're giving you is an immaculate story that they have put together. And it's very easy to see that because if you just look at what is before the Bible, what the Bible was translated from, and if you just do it yourself, you see that it is open for translation. It is very open for translation. And what you're going to get is the translation of the understanding of the person who is translating. Okay? This is not some master translation. It doesn't work that way. So this is why you have different versions. King James Version, you know, whatever version you read. Normally Christians or black Christians choose the King James Version when they have no knowledge of the King James character and what that even represents, right? So it's a lot of I wouldn't say trickery and deceit, but I believe these people thought they were doing the right things, but you got to understand that Europeans and different type of people are not the most intelligent people and not the most connected when it comes to the realm, decoding these mysteries, these ancient mysteries. I just don't believe in their minds. Because when I look at the things they construct and put together, that's when I can see what they're actually made of, right? I can see how they think based upon what they create, and how this whole thing is going. So why take one thing from them and say, okay, this is perfect. This is supposed to be perfect. I will accept it as perfect in this weird mind frame. The only way that really works is if you're constantly put in a situation or position where you're being indoctrinated over and over. And this is why you have to keep returning to this place and, paying your tithes and everything like that. And, side note, the word tithes, because remember, you got to study these things. These are legal terms because all this stuff is based on legality. I'll get into more of that later. Common law versus natural law, different stuff like this. So even when you just mention something like tithes, the word tithes, if you look it up, it's a legal term that literally means that you're renting the church. So basically, it's a rent. You're supposed to pay 1/10%. You're supposed to pay 10%, 1/10 of your earnings. Even in the law, it says 1/10, right? So this is not something that came from your Bible. This is not something that, this is something that, yes, they put there because, yes, it's also a law. So let's include this in the Bible. Because if they're already hooked by religion, let's get some other ideologies in here so that it can link into society and the way we're trying to construct things, right? And they also put some adverse opinions so that you could not just feel swayed in one direction if you did start waking up. If you did start noticing something was funny, you could find some adverse opinion and say, oh, okay, well, maybe things are all good, right? These are deep tricks, right? These tricks are high-level tricks. So I'm going to get into some of this. I'm going to show you. Rather than just tell you that, I'm going to show you, right? Some of this stuff is going to be scary probably to people that don't know how this thing is constructed. So just moving forward from the Bible, that was just my introduction, right? I started with that, studying Hebrew in the beginning. What I found was that the term in the beginning, for example, is barashit, right, in Hebrew. In Hebrew, that is 3 words, and those 3 words have about 12 to 15 words under them as subwords that each mean in English what that word could be. And that's for each word. So to get in the beginning, somebody would have to choose to see it that way, is what I'm trying to say. It is up to the interpretation of the person that is taking on the information and sitting there breaking it down. For you to read it and say that is law, you have to agree to that. And for you to agree to that blindly, something's wrong with you because they got you. And they have tricked you with some mystical teachings mixed in with man's teachings. It's very simple. Okay? So once I started seeing that this thing was a bigger code, once I started understanding that Hebrew is to be broken down into numbers and not necessarily words, because the numbers contained an energy. All right? Numbers are symbols. So these symbols contain an energy. That's why numbers have value. So when they talk about Jewish gematria and things like that, they're breaking down these words back into number symbols, because if you do it that way, you can still see the essence of the word through its numerology. Okay? So a lot of this stuff isn't as mystical as they're trying to make it seem. It's just different from what they told you to believe in. Right? So this is why people say people are dying by the numbers. Things are being done by the numbers. This is why your calendar has numbers, your clocks has numbers. Everything that's kept track of needs to have numbers, because that is the higher energy, right? Those are symbols, okay? So when I saw that in the beginning was kind of constructed, I just looked into more and more things. I started studying etymology. It started showing me that words came from other words. And again, these are very loose interpretations. By the time they get around here to the West, to English, man, because when you do etymology, even when you just look in a dictionary, you'll see the English word. Then behind that, you should probably see Latin. And behind that, you'll probably see French. Then you'll probably see German. And they're not going to keep going, but it does keep going, because it goes all the way back to just symbols that came from our ancestors. But if they have intercepted the knowledge at a certain point, reconstructed and reconfigured it, given it to you in a whole different format, and then you sit here and believe it and can't realize or see with your real eyes what this stuff actually is. It's very tough. It's a cruel trick that they're playing. But this religion thing is just the beginning of the trick. That is just the root of the trick, okay? Because this religion thing, I'm going to do more than one episode about this, because I want to cover this whole map. This religion thing goes out into space and the planets. It comes all the way back around into geometry and mathematics. This is how it makes its way back to Earth, through mathematics. All this stuff is what they will not teach you the connections of and in between things. They just won't, because that will decode the game, right? So moving forward with the Bible, one of the last things I'm going to say is that opened me up to understanding why they started numbering the scriptures and chapters. That wasn't always a thing. And also the term Holy Bible, which I've said before, came from the Latin terms Helios Biblios, which just means sun book, right? Helios Biblios. And actually, Biblios and the term book is even a loose translation, because Biblios really means papyrus, or a stack of papers, right? A collection of papers. So this is a collection of papers about the sun. Okay? So you got to already understand that the Holy Bible is the Helios Biblios. Look it up. Okay? You just got to know that a lot of this stuff is trickery, and it's very, very, very unfortunate that some cultures fall for it heavier than other cultures. All right? Let's move on, because I got a lot to cover with this. So let's talk about the laws of this place. Let's talk about where we live here in the United States. Now, nothing I'm saying is illegal information. This is just public information, but I don't think they like people really talking about it too much. So I'm going to do these few episodes about it, and I'm going to leave it alone, okay? Now, this information is from some of my notes from 2017. This is back when I was on the journey, and I chose not to ever include a lot of this stuff because I used to think it was too heavy to really put out too early because I just didn't want to attract too much attention at once, right? Based on what I'm talking about, okay? Because this is going to be factual stuff, all right? So when we're talking about the United States, we're talking about the laws, right? What you got to understand is back in the day, this whole place was classified. It was either classified as land or water, okay? So this was an early classification of this world, right? So what started happening is with all the boats and the trades and the ships and everything that was going on the sea, they started to have to make certain laws, one set of laws for the sea, one set of laws for the land, right? This was called land law, and the other was called sea law, or the land of the sea. The law of the sea, which was also called the law of commerce, right? Remember that. The law of commerce. You can also call it the law of banking, right? So the law of the land was kind of in opposition to the law of the sea. Okay? So people on the land have specific customs to their land. This is why when you go to different countries, um, they have their own laws. So let's say you live in Georgia here in the United States. If you go to London, their laws are going to be different. You're the same person, but the laws that you will be following on that land will be different because of what's called the land laws. Okay? Now, here's the thing. Sea law is more of sea law is more considered an international law, right? Because the seas go everywhere. So this was an international law. And what I'm going to show you is some tricks that they did that are just amazing in the way that they have done this. It's despicable, but it's amazing how they've strung this thing together. So the law of the sea is also referred to as maritime law. Okay? So if you want to go and get something to write with, or if you already have it, good for you. But this is going to be full of terms that you're probably going to want to look up again at some point because you're going to want to see what I was really saying. All right? I'm telling you right now. So when you talk about maritime law, the first thing I hear is the word marry. Okay, this is when I was still in my etymology phase, real heavy. And I said, because coming out of religion is what brought me into maritime law. I'm going to say that again. Coming out through religion is what brought me into maritime law. And what got me to understand that a lot of the stuff this is built on is old religion, old belief, and a lot of mystical, spiritual, occult, which just means hidden type of information that it blows my mind that the average person will never know this stuff, okay? So, maritime law, right? This is also referred to as admiralty law. If you don't have a law dictionary, I would encourage you to buy some law dictionaries. Look them up online, download them. There's a lot of different versions. Get as many as you can so that you can understand what these terms mean that we're calling each other and these different terms and how they're putting us in contracts. They're putting us in contracts with each other, right? This has a lot to do with Black Lives Matter as far as how people are feeling about black people being killed in the streets, black persons, right? Persons of interest, right? So you got to understand what these terms mean before you go and try to fight for a natural person who is not a person of interest. Those are two different things. The person of interest can be killed because he does not exist. Now, a lot of the stuff I'm saying is going to go over your head. I know that. So you just have to get with somebody that knows, listen to this again, and look these terms up, all right? So one of the biggest things they do with this whole thing, how do they get you in the game? Let's start from there. How does the game start, right? How do you first enter this thing? Well, it's through birth. That is where you first come into the game. Now, this is due to your parents. They had no idea they was entering you into the game, but this is what they was doing. So when you're born in the United States, you got to first understand that you're given a birth certificate. A certificate is, by law, something that denotes ownership. Okay? Now, you might think that means the ownership of the parents. No. This is more so talking about the ownership of the actual country. All right? So, how can you be owned by the country? Let me tell you how that works first. So, a lot of y'all have heard of the Constitution. But what you don't realize is that when they're referring to the Constitution, a lot of times they're referring to two different constitutions. Now, right now, you might be saying, well, how could there be two different constitutions? I've never heard of that. You absolutely have heard of it, but you just can't realize you heard of it. Okay? Let me explain. In 1776, which is what we call the bicentennial, we understand that there was a constitution created, correct? A lot of y'all are saying right now, yeah, absolutely, that's correct. Well, here's the thing. The Constitution of 1776 was the Constitution of the United States of America, the USA, which they called the Republic, right? So you remember when you're taking your pledge and you say to the Republic, for which it stands, okay, this is a republic. This is the United States of America. This is an entity with all the states, correct? All right. Now, in 1871, there was a constitution for the United States, the U.S. Constitution. So now, you have the United States of America Constitution of 1776, and you have the U.S. Constitution of 1871 that was created in Delaware. So what you got to understand and understand is that when you are born and when you are declared a citizen, you got to know that citizen is a legal term. And I've told you before, it comes from the same place that the word slave comes from. Because a citizen is an employee of the USINC, the Incorporated U.S. That is a business. That is what you are an employee of immediately when you are born. Okay? Think about this. Now, what is it called when you force or when you don't give someone a choice whether they're going to be your employee or not and they're automatically your employee? That is a form of slavery. So here's the trick, how they get you to voluntarily work for your slavery. So one of the most messed up things about when you're born, you sign the birth certificate, your parent signs on a line, even you signed if you have kids, where it says informant. This is a legal term. Okay? This is a legal term. So where they have informant is where your mother and father sign the birth certificate. What they are doing is informing the country that you have arrived and it has all your information on it. Why is this? Well, remember when I said there was law of the sea and law of the land? The law of the sea is called maritime law, which they also call admiralty law. Now, there's something funny about that. Does anybody know what it's called when they read you your rights when you're being arrested? What are those rights called? Miranda rights. What do you think the term Miranda comes from? Maritime law. Admiralty law. So then you might say, well, How is sea law working on land? This is the tricky part. This is why people become lawyers. This is why. Because they're going to be privy to some information that everyone else won't know. This is also why everything that we do deals with commerce and money will also be under these laws and will also have water names to let you know they are playing the game masterfully and you just can't notice. I'm going to give you some examples of that. I'm going to give you some examples I have written down here for terms that are always used to show you that you're underwater. So, when you're talking about debt, that's being under. Drowning in a sea of debt. Trying to keep your head above water. Staying afloat. Pockets dried up. Money going through your hands like water. My house is underwater. Buying things on sale. Bailing out the banks. Slush funds. Pulling your money together. Cash flow. All washed up. All these things are based on the law of commerce, maritime law. This is why where your money is kept is called a bank, from the term riverbank. Controls the current or the currency. You get it? This is why all ships are female. All ships are women. I guarantee you can't find any ship that's named after a man, because this is all being done under the same energy. So all ships have women names because they all deliver precious cargo. This comes after labor. I'm just showing you how this is right in front of you, and you can't figure it out, and they're not going to tell you that this is all a part of something. Okay? So even when you're talking about the dock where the ship pulls up, that's referred to as a berth. Why do you think all those boats are right now stuck out in the ocean? They're saying can't deliver all your Christmas stuff. This is a game that they're playing. This is symbology. They're arguing about abortions and at the same time not letting births happen. Just think about this. You have to understand that the energy plays that's always behind what they're doing. So the birth is where the ship docks, the dock, right? Who delivers the baby, right? So you got to understand, this is why it needs a certificate of manifestation when it shows up. Upon every arrival, you need a paperwork that shows a certificate of manifestation. Correct? Everything on board has to be accounted for. Everything delivered has to be checked out, the weight, the shape of it. Remind you of anything? The birth certificate. Because you are just another version of that. This is the certificate of manifest. You were manifested. You were manifested, and the informant told on you. Wrote down the time and everything. Think about it. When you're born, your mother's water breaks. The water breaks. You come down the birth canal. She delivers in the delivery room. So under maritime law, you got to understand that, and it's not funny at all, but just sometimes just with these words, it's like, man, they didn't even try to hide it. They just don't count on you being a studied person. Under maritime law, a person is considered a product or a human resource. Look it up. It's very important because if you don't know the knowledge of a person and the definition of a person, then you're really going to be thrown for a loop, because a person is not even what you think you are. A person can be Your car, a business, a building, a chair, a table. Yeah. A shirt, pair of pants. Anything can be your person. Why do you think the police ask you if you have something on your person? And that's going to cover everything from your pocket to your car and everything around you. Think about it. A person is not a living being. You see? There's a difference between a person and what they call a natural person. That's what you're thinking about. Now, that's why it's important to have legal dictionaries to be able to look this stuff up. What is a natural person? I'm going to read to you what a natural person is by law. It is a human being, comma, as opposed to artificial or fictitious persons, such as corporations. The phrase natural person does not include corporate entities, but the phrase person without qualification may or may not include artificial persons, depending on the context. So they're already telling you, if you don't know what they're calling you and you're accepting it, man, you're entering contracts. And this is why you're responsible and liable. A person is a liable entity. A natural person cannot be held liable for any business. We'll get into that. This is also when you get into your Fifth Amendment right to not incriminate yourself, because the law references a person having a right. So, are you claiming to be the natural person, or have you fully accepted the role as the artificial person that you didn't even know existed? But you have been playing them your whole life. And you have also been responsible for the artificial person's debt and everything else in the name that has been placed upon you by the informant. That is not you. That is a name. We'll talk about this. This is why I'm telling you, they don't want people knowing this kind of information because it breaks the game. I'm only going to do these episodes once, and you know they might get deleted. You know how they do. I already don't get sponsored because I'm not talking about anything sponsorable. I'm just talking too responsible. You see? So when you're born and when you're considered the human resource, and when the parent signs the birth certificate that is saying informant next to the signature, when you understand also that a signature is a sign of nature, it is a sign of the natural person putting their mark that can never be duplicated because it is equivalent to your fingerprint, which is also your signature or your sign of nature, that you exist as what you are. No name. All right? A lot of this might be hard to understand, but follow what I'm saying. So, a tougher pill to swallow is also to realize that your physical body in the form of this artificial person that is using your name in all capital letters is being traded every day on the stock exchange. Because the birth certificate, which we all know, every birth certificate, as soon as it is created, it is sent where? It is sent to the Department of Commerce. The United States Department of Commerce. Money. But wait a minute. We already said that the law of commerce is the law of the sea, maritime law, admiralty law, not land law. This is what I'm telling you. They're getting you to participate into a storyline that is actually not happening. Think about that. let's go forward. So, just like when something shows up at the dock, and let's say cargo shows up broken or damaged, there has to be a certificate for that as well. This is the same as, let's say, a stillborn child or some type of complication where the child is born deceased. They would then make what? A death certificate. What does this tell you? That the certificate had nothing to do with you being here or not. It is about something outside of you that has something to do with money and commerce. This is why it's an official seal, it's an official document. It is a bond. If you don't know what a bond is, you're too grown to not know what a bond is. It comes from the word bondage. There's value in bondage. So this is also why you'll have terms like they'll dock your pay, right? When they take your money. Or when you're in court, you're on the docket. Because what I'm going to show you with this is that when you're dealing with commerce, you say, okay, if they're doing the land of the sea right here on land, where are they conducting this business? Where are they able to make these moves? Well, they're doing it right in the normal courtrooms that are on land. But what you don't realize is that when you go in a courtroom, and they are flying their flag, what you might not realize is that this is a part of something called, I think it was either called flag law or, it's called the International Law of Flags, where a ship would display their flag to decree what laws they followed on that ship, right? Follow me with this. So when you're going into a courtroom to do business, they send you something in the mail that has your name on it in all capital letters. Now, this is what I'm going to show you. This is called a straw man. This person does not exist. What ends up happening is because you don't understand the law, you respond. The natural man speaks up for the straw man, the entity, the zombie, the thing that does not have a brain. You got to get where I'm going with this. Why do you think in The Wizard of Oz, the straw man didn't have a brain? Why was there a straw man? Might want to look that up. So this is the you that is created upon your birth. When the informant signs the birth certificate, they create a company entity in your name, all capital letters. You get a social security number. This is also a number that references a bank account. So does the red number down in the corner or in the back of your birth certificate. That is an account number. It's a 9-digit number. That is an account. It might be hard to understand this, but as a natural person, you're born with inherent rights on this earth, and you're born with a certain ownership of stuff, money, property, or property that equates to a monetary amount, let's say. With the amount of people on earth mixed with, let's say, divided with the amount of land and what would be owned by each person, there's something that you are allotted upon birth. This is what you don't know. So when you're born, they create a bond with your certificate. They send that over to the Department of Commerce, who deals with England. You are just something that has money backing it in an account, but they send you out to work and tell you that you're starting at the bottom. This is to keep your account nice and healthy throughout your life. If you have good credit, remember, the money they credit each person is from their own account. They just don't want you to spend all of your money and turn it into what they call debt. Then they cannot recoup that upon your death. They cannot use that in the stock market. It brings your stock down. There are ways to look yourself up on the stock market. This might scare you, might scare the hell out of you, might shock you. Some of you might not even be surprised about any of this. So you're born into these systems that essentially trick you for the rest of your life. So in court, there's a fence, right? There's a gate. This is what's referred to as the water gate. The people that sit on the side and that's next in court are on the dock, sitting on the dock, right? Sitting on the docket. Docks are already described as masses of land next to, or a strip of land that runs alongside water. So how are you going to have a docket indoors? This is what you got to understand. Once you cross that barrier, you're on their ship. How do you know that for sure? Because wherever you see a United States flag and it has yellow fringes around it or gold fringes around it, they are under admiralty law. That is going to be your children's schools, the courtrooms, and other places where they play fiction games that you show up to participate in as a natural person because you don't know no better. There's things you got to go through to get out of all this because they have us in contractual agreements. We didn't know that almost everything we were doing was causing a contract. So when you pass the gate, you're under the jurisdiction of the court. This is the water gate. Okay, this is the bar. Only lawyers can pass the bar without that type of jurisdiction, right? You must be authorized to pass the bar. Once you enter the gate, you are under maritime law. That's why there's a bailiff, and you post bail or jump bail, which is overboard. There's a bailee. That is the person that is trusted with the movable property. When you look this stuff up and what it means. You are the movable property, also referred to as chattel or people on land, persons. You are referred to as a maritime admiralty product by law. A lot of people don't know this. This is why they have jurisdiction over you, because you work for them. You work for this country. A lot of people don't realize that you are born with a double citizenship. How do you have a double citizenship? Right now, everyone listening to this has a double citizenship right now, and proof is in their pocket. Because on one hand, you are living here in the United States of America. You are a part of the USA. But on the other hand, you are a part of the U.S. corporation, the U.S. INC, which means the state you live in, you are under their rules and laws, which is under the government, giving you double citizenship. So you will be a citizenship of the United States of America and of your state. That's why you have a state ID and everybody has an ID. What is the purpose of that? It is to reference the laws that you follow. What land and what laws. That's why you have a flag. That is your ship. That is your ship. Is not this whole thing on water? Think about the trick that they're playing. What is the point? What is the trick? You can declare yourself a common law citizen, a natural person, and there's ways to do that legally and get out of all these contracts by declaring them unconscionable contracts and taking the right steps to exit the contracts and put these people in binds and positions because they are breaking their oaths under your ignorance. So when you're in trouble, they're telling you you're in hot water. Somebody got to bail you out. The judge sits on the bench. The bench is higher than the courtroom because you need to look up to the law. It's all done for a reason. This is a ritual, but you have to participate for it to take place. This is why they bang the gavel and do different things. This is also a type. This is a type of occult ritual. This is an energy play like everything else. This is why they wear the black robes. This is why you wear the black robes when you graduate. All this has to do with Saturnian worship, which all has to go back around into religion, into the Kemetans, into the ancestors, the deities, the planets. They're all the same things, named different things. And this is why people are so confused. So even you are the same things, named a different thing. And the biggest trick here is believing that your name is who you are. And when someone calls your name, the natural person turns around. That's something you got to keep a hold of. Don't overly become your name, because this system is built on that type of trickery. So they sit on the bench, and in Egypt, the bench was also referred to as the bank. So this is what I mean. This is a commerce thing, right? This has to be about money. So there has to be damages financially. So a judge is just a banker who will now determine who gets the money. And at the end of every case, someone will get money because that's what it has to be about. What I'm showing you is this whole thing they have constructed that they really don't mind pretending with because it works so well. Especially when they teach your kids about these systems in school, but don't let them know that the systems are voluntary to participate with, because they're not really real systems. Only if you sign contractual agreements. Then you have obligations. So they play the banker, right? And this brings you back to understand that the bank is what controls the flow of the money, right? So when they want to find you, they put out a bench warrant, which I just told you that a bank is a bench, or a bench that they sit on is referred to as the bank. So they put out a bank warrant. You also got to understand that you as a person are 70 some odd percent water. So think about the knowledge that they are playing on you by getting you to go ahead and go with this. You're 70% water. You're a biological battery. Understand this. Your electricity. Understand this. So if you can't be bailed out, then you get put in a cell. And don't cells relate to batteries? Don't cells relate to the body? Don't the cells reside in the body? So they put your body in a cell that is in a body of something that you didn't realize. This is why there's shipping. When something is sent back and forth, it's on a ship. It's shipping. It's another maritime business term. Then you got to understand friendships, relationships, all these different ships that you need to get off of. This is a game. So even the term captain, when you're talking about these guys out in the water and these ships, the captain, that word came from the same word as capital, which means money or water or liquid assets. Do you get what I'm doing with this? This is all built on water plays. A lot of this is just some game that people really high up and wealthy can kind of keep going over top of what we call life. It's a survival game. So a lot of you have heard of the Moors. This is a few nautical terms that I wrote down. Being moored is to anchor or to chain or tie down something, right? So the moors are the anchor. These are all terms that are nautical terms that are used in your everyday life. A dock, a structure extending along the shore or out from the shore. So this is why you got to understand, well, why am I sitting on a docket when I'm in court? This is what I'm telling you. You get on their ship once you pass the bar and once you pass the water gate. This is very intricate stuff they do. You can look this stuff up. Look up common law. Look up statute law. Statutory law, right? And let's see. They got a few more terms they like to use, like jury rigging, which is where they get the term jerry rig, which in the hood they used to say nigger rig when you put something together that's not supposed to really put together and work that way. It was the same thing they were doing. It used to be called jerry rig, and which had to do with things breaking on the ship and on the sailboat, and then they had to do things to repair it, right, with different rope and different wood material. So you're talking about the bar. I said that, which is between the audience and the ruling section of the ship. And you have to pass the bar to be under the jurisdiction of the court. Again, I was talking about the American flag with the yellow or the gold fringe. That lets you know you're in a place that is under Admiralty maritime law, where they will try to read you your Miranda rights, which are not even rights. It's actually referred to by law as a Miranda warning. The warnings of Miranda, okay? This is what you'll be under if you agree. Okay, and that's very key. If you agree. And a lot of people don't know that you're allowed to say something when they infringe upon you. You're allowed to ask questions, because what I've also seen in etymology and seen people reference is that to ask king or to be asking questions is to act as king, right? So ask king is to act as king and to want to know the information and want it to be given to them. Okay, so understand that you need to ask and say something when someone's trying to put you in a predicament or a situation. And here's an example of what someone said as the natural person when being pulled over, when being put in a situation where a police officer tried to act in authority under the color of law, where he is only a civil servant, right? So what they said was, I do not consent to this. I am not a name. I am a natural person standing here under common law. I will be happy to contract with you. If that's what you want to do, I will accept contracting with you. My fee is $10,000 an hour. Do we have a contract? Because now remember, this is an example, but what I'm trying to get you to understand is that these people are acting under an oath. And if you remind them that you know that and ask them if they are willingly breaking their oath and letting them know that you are standing there as a natural person and you will enter contract with them if it is under your terms and this is what you charge, because you can charge them because you are now acting as the banker, as the authorized user, so to speak, of yourself, your name, the name in all caps that they send to your house and put on your information. Okay? I know a lot of you might not be able to follow this. It's a lot. If you want to get going on this information, let's start looking up stuff like the straw man, or even a good one is, there's a book called the Creature from Jekyll Island. That's a good one. It explains how banking and things got put together because really they're just tricking everybody out of their money. And they got people running around scared of the police and different authorities. But there's a reason that we're under this stuff, okay? Like I said, when the informant signs that birth certificate, you gotta know what you're getting yourself into. I refer to a lot of these things as unconscionable contracts because they are not making a clear connection with us about what we're involving ourselves in. That's what makes it unconscionable and arguable to me, right? So even legal terms like the word registration. The word registration, when you register something, when you buy something and you register it, registration literally means giving away whatever you are registering to the person you are registering it with. So when you register something to somebody, you buy it, you give it to them, they give you a key code or give you something back so that you can now function with the thing. Now you don't own that no more. They do by law. They don't have to give you access to it, because if you don't follow the laws how they told you to use it because you registered it, you will not be able to use it. You see how this works? There is a trick that they do to get you to give your stuff away. When you register a birth certificate, this is what I'm trying to show you. This has to be registered. Your parents register your birth certificate. They have given you away to whoever they have registered you with. Whoever they registered you with. With the United States, they have registered you with a corporation that you now are a citizen or employee of. This is what I'm trying to show you. You have no choice unless you grow up, learn the stuff that you're involved in, stop being so blind to what's around you, listen to people that are trying to tell you new information, and actually take some time to study. Okay? You have to become a gentleman or become a scholar by first becoming a gentleman. You have to give yourself time. Okay? So, even the term application, this is very sad how this stuff is. The term application means literally, you are a beggar. And it is assumed that you understand that you are giving up the rights for something in exchange for what you are applying for or begging for. So when you apply for a job or beg for a position, you got to understand that we're going to treat you a certain way. And you're going to sign these contracts when we let you in, because it's not as simple as doing a service for pay. No, 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 no. This is more of you being an employee for me and me being your quote unquote master. So you got to understand this. To submit means to bond to bend to the will of another. So to be willing, right? So when you submit your application, you got to understand the stuff they're doing to us, you can't get out of and you go nuts in because you don't get it yet. Okay? A birth certificate. So I told you that the parent signs as the informant. Also, there's a logo on the back of your birth certificate, and there's also something that should say, maybe just on the old ones, that this is not a proof of identity. So it lets you know all those things you've been signing up with your birth certificate, they didn't even need that. This is just a game they're playing because it tells you that it is not that, okay? A certificate, when you look it up, is a registered bond. I already told you what it means to register. So your certificate is the bond that has been registered, your bondage. You have given away yourself into bondage to this corporation. You have chosen to do that freely. All right? So, look, it is a lot going on when you don't understand what you're involved in. This is why you shouldn't vote or give energy on this polarized system that they give you, which is normally a choice over another, right? It's a polarity. You're voting on the polls. All these things they're getting you to do to give up your natural rights, your natural laws that you've been given, and your what they call God-given rights, your unalienable rights, the things you were born with, the things you're supposed to have. So just understand, as I start to close this out, I'm going to do another episode hitting a few more things that I didn't have a chance to get to. Is that, remember, when Rome ruled the world, Caesar ruled, right? And Caesar ruled from a hill. This is where you get the term Capitol Hill. This is where you get Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. This is why D.C. is in the District of Columbia and not in the U.S. It is under a different jurisdiction, right? It is a different corporation. That is where our president is, correct? So what you got to understand is that the Capitol buildings and all the Egyptian symbols and the Roman symbols and stuff they have in Washington, D.C. is because it is paying homage to Caesar. And that's why they say all roads lead to Rome. So I just want to leave you with that. And remember, a corporation needs to be a corporation. You have to have a president, a vice president, and a secretary of treasury. So when you see these things, just understand and understand that you are a part of a corporation or a business. So get that stuff first. Understand that knowledge before you try to fight a system that you don't understand. And you won't have to realize why you can't, or sit and try to realize why you can't make progress. Why nothing's happening. Okay? Nothing's happening because they kind of got us in a checkmate. You got to understand how to claim your rights back and understand and recognize who and what you are as a natural person to earth and not just something to be used by a system. All right? So I hope this episode has been somewhat informative. I'm going to do more of these episodes that touch on the law a little bit more and just how it affects us every day with the stuff we're going around arguing about, like mandates and different things like that. I suggest Get some law dictionaries, look these terms up, and educate yourself, all right? So, repeat listeners, I appreciate you. First time listeners, welcome. If you got something from this, pass it to somebody. If not, hold on to it for yourself. Get some good talking points and some good research points. So, I appreciate you guys' energy. Support me however you want to. Check out everything in the description. And until next time, wholeness and a whole bunch of gratitude. All right? Go.